When I came home after a 26-hour nursing shift, I found a second refrigerator sitting in my kitchen. My daughter-in-law looked me straight in the eye and said, "That's mine. From now on, you buy your own food." She even labeled everything I'd bought with her name, forgetting one little detail. They were living rent-free in my house, so I came up with a surprise that made them both wake up crying. Stay with me until the end and comment where you're watching from. I'd love to see how far my story travels. My legs felt like concrete as I fumbled with the keys at the door. 26 hours. That's how long I'd been on my feet at the hospital, juggling emergencies, short staff, and endless patients. At 66, I should have slowed down by now, but nursing is what I do, and the bills don't wait. The house was unusually quiet. Normally, I'd hear the television, or Thalia, my son's wife, chatting loudly on her phone. My son, Desmond, had moved back in 6 months earlier after losing his job at a marketing firm. "It's just temporary, Mom," he'd said with that apologetic smile I knew too well. "Just until we get back on our feet." I set down my purse, kicked off my white nursing shoes, and felt instant relief as my sore feet touched the cool hardwood floor. The familiar scent of lavender hung in the air, mixed with something sharp and chemical. Heading to the kitchen for a glass of water before collapsing into bed, I froze mid-step. Against the far wall, right where my little breakfast table used to be, stood a massive stainless steel refrigerator. Not just any fridge, but a double-door beast that looked like it belonged in a restaurant. For a moment, I thought exhaustion was playing tricks on me, but no, the polished chrome handles gleamed under the light, humming softly. My modest white fridge, the one I'd bought 3 years ago, had been shoved into a corner like it no longer mattered. "What on earth?" I whispered, stepping closer. "Oh, good. You're home." Thalia's calm, cool voice came from behind me. I turned to see her standing there, perfectly dressed even though it was nearly midnight, blonde hair in a neat ponytail, expensive workout clothes that probably cost more than my week's paycheck. "Thalia, what is this?" I asked, pointing to the enormous fridge. She walked right past me, opened both shiny doors, and smiled proudly. Inside, it was completely stocked: organic vegetables, imported cheese, wine, premium meats, all neatly arranged like a store display. "This is mine," she said simply. "From now on, you'll need to buy your own food." Her words hit me like a slap. I held onto my old fridge for balance, my mind struggling to process what she'd just said. "I'm sorry." "What?" I asked quietly. Thalia turned to face me, her eyes suddenly cold. I said, "This is my refrigerator. You'll have to make other plans for your groceries." Then she opened my fridge, the one I'd stocked 2 days ago, and started pulling things out. My milk, my leftover casserole, even my orange juice for tomorrow's breakfast. "Actually," she continued in that businesslike tone, "most of this will need to go. I've already labeled everything with my name." She held up a roll of white stickers, the kind you'd use for a yard sale. "This way there won't be any confusion about what belongs to who." I stood there speechless as she carefully placed stickers on the food I'd bought with my own money, in my own house. My yogurt, my sandwich meat, even the butter I used for cooking. "Thalia," I said softly, "this is my house. This is my food." She paused and gave me a look that was almost pitying. "Oh, Estelle," she sighed, "Desmond and I have been talking, and we think it's time to make things more organized around here." The way she said my name, slow and patronizing, made my skin crawl. This was the same woman who'd thanked me over and over for letting them stay, who'd hugged me last week and called me the best mother-in-law ever. "Where's Desmond?" I asked, my voice trembling. But deep down, I already knew. "He's sleeping," Thalia said without even looking up. "He's got that early meeting tomorrow, the one with the potential employer you found for him." She finished labeling the yogurt and moved on to my package of English muffins. "He really needs his rest, so I'd appreciate it if you could keep the noise down." Keep the noise down. In my house. After 26 hours on my feet keeping strangers alive, I stood there swaying from exhaustion, watching this woman, this polite stranger who had somehow replaced the kind daughter-in-law I once knew, calmly claim ownership of my groceries. Each tiny white sticker felt like a declaration of war. "I don't understand," I finally managed to whisper. "What's happening here?" Thalia closed the fridge door and turned toward me. Under the harsh fluorescent light, her face looked different, sharper, harder. "What's happening," she said coolly, "is that we're all adults here, and adults have boundaries." She patted the shiny new refrigerator. "This is mine." Then she nodded toward my old white one, now shoved into the corner like an embarrassment. "And that's yours." "But I paid for everything in there," I said weakly. "And now I'm taking responsibility for the household food budget," she replied smoothly. "It's better this way. Less confusion, less mixing of resources. Less mixing of resources." As if 40 years of steady paychecks and quiet sacrifice somehow didn't count as contribution. I opened my mouth to speak, to ask where my son was, to demand an explanation, but nothing came out. The light above us buzzed softly, and I realized that something inside my home had shifted while I'd been away saving lives at the hospital. Thalia smiled then, the same bright smile she always used when she wanted to sound polite. "You look exhausted, Estelle. You should get some rest. We'll talk more tomorrow about the new arrangements." She started walking toward the hallway, then paused. "Oh, and I moved some of your pantry things to make space for my supplies. They're in that box by the back door. You might want to keep them in your room or something." Then she was gone. I stood there alone, staring at 2 refrigerators. One full of food I wasn't allowed to touch, the other, nearly empty, pushed aside like an unwanted guest. By the back door sat a small box. My coffee, my oatmeal, my spices, the little things that made my kitchen mine. In that moment, surrounded by the quiet evidence of my own displacement, I felt something deep in my chest crack. Not break, not yet, but crack like ice under too much pressure. Something was very wrong in my house, and I had a sinking feeling the second refrigerator was only the beginning. Next morning, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those white stickers, my yogurt, my butter, my sandwich meat, all marked with Thalia's name like tiny flags claiming conquered territory. By 5:30 a.m., I gave up and went to the kitchen for my usual cup of coffee. That's when I noticed the next change. My coffee maker was gone. Not broken, not packed away. Gone. In its place sat a gleaming espresso machine, the kind you'd see in an Italian cafe. A small placard leaned against it in Thalia's elegant handwriting. "Please ask before using. Settings are very delicate." I stared at the note until the meaning sank in. I needed permission to make coffee in my own kitchen. "Looking for something?" Her voice made me jump. Thalia stood in the doorway, wearing a silk robe that probably cost more than my monthly utility bill. Her hair was perfect, as if she'd just stepped out of a commercial. "My coffee maker," I said slowly. "Where is it?" "Oh, that old thing?" "It was taking up space, so I packed it away." She brushed her fingers along the chrome surface of her espresso machine almost lovingly. "This is so much better, don't you think? It makes real coffee." Real coffee, as if what I'd been drinking for years was pretend. "I don't know how to use that," I admitted. "It's quite simple once you learn," she said, pressing a few buttons with the confidence of a barista. Steam hissed and rich coffee aroma filled the kitchen. Though the settings really are delicate. One wrong move and you could damage the grinder. That would be such a shame. This machine cost over $2,000. $2,000 for coffee. I thought about my careful $100 weekly grocery budget, stretched to feed 3 adults, and felt a dull ache in my stomach. "Where did you put my coffee maker?" I asked again. "In the storage closet in the basement," she said lightly. "Along with some of your other appliances, I had to make room for my kitchen essentials. You understand, right?" My kitchen essentials. I looked around, noticing all the quiet erasures. The ceramic canisters my sister gave me for my birthday, gone. The little herb garden by the window, replaced by a modern arrangement of succulents. The kitchen that had once been mine now looked like it belonged to someone else entirely. Even my kitchen towels had been replaced. elegant gray and white ones that looked like they belonged in a showroom, not a family home. "Thalia, we need to talk about this," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. "This is my house." She paused mid-sip, head tilting slightly, feigning confusion. "Of course it is, Estelle, but we all live here now, don't we? It just makes sense to optimize the space for everyone's comfort." Everyone's comfort? Or just hers? Her perfect smile never faltered, but something behind her eyes flickered. "I don't know what you mean," she replied lightly. Before I could answer, Desmond appeared in the doorway. My 42-year-old son looked disheveled, his hair messy, the same wrinkled polo shirt as yesterday. "Morning, Mom," he mumbled, not quite meeting my eyes. "Desmond, we need to discuss the changes your wife's been making." I gestured around the kitchen, the twin refrigerators, the rearranged counters, my missing belongings. He glanced at Thalia, who moved beside him and rested her manicured hand gently on his arm. "What changes?" he asked carefully. "The refrigerator, the coffee maker, my things being moved without even asking." "Oh, that." He rubbed his face, still avoiding my gaze. "Yeah, Thalia mentioned she was reorganizing things. It makes sense, right? More efficient." "Efficient for whom?" I asked, my patience cracking. Thalia stepped forward, her voice taking on that calm, patronizing tone I'd started to dread. "Estelle, I know change can be difficult for people your age, but this really is better for everyone. You've been working such long hours. When was the last time you had the energy to cook or keep track of groceries? This way, you don't have to worry about any of that." "People your age," the word stung like a slap. I was 66, not ancient. I'd been managing this home for decades, just fine. "I don't want you managing my grocery inventory," I said firmly now. "I want my coffee maker back, and I want my things where they belong." Desmond shifted, staring at the floor. "Mom, maybe we could compromise," he said softly. "If Thalia wants to handle more of the household stuff, doesn't that make life easier for you?" "It would," Thalia said quickly, stepping in before I could respond. "If everyone could just be a little more flexible." She opened her giant refrigerator again, revealing neat shelves of color-coded containers and perfectly aligned produce. "I've already done all the meal planning for the week," she explained proudly. "Everything's organized by day and nutritional value. It's actually quite advanced." I looked at the rows of bottled water, the imported vegetables, the pre-labeled meals. It was impressive, cold, precise, and completely foreign, a kitchen designed by someone who'd never once worried about a grocery bill. "What am I supposed to eat?" I asked quietly. "Well, you'll need to shop for yourself, of course," Thalia said matter-of-factly. "There's still some room in your refrigerator for personal items. Not much, but if you're careful about portions and stick to basics, it should be adequate." Basics? Portions? Like I was renting a corner of my own kitchen. "I can't afford to buy all my own groceries and pay the household bills," I admitted, my voice tight. Silence filled the kitchen. Desmond studied his shoes. Thalia adjusted her already perfect hair. Then she spoke, her tone soft but every word carefully measured. "Oh, Estelle, I didn't realize finances were such a concern. Maybe it's time to start adjusting your situation." "What kind of adjusting?" I asked. "Well, you're working so many hours at your age. It can't be healthy. Maybe it's time to think about retirement. Or at least part-time." My heart thudded painfully in my chest. Retirement meant living on barely enough to survive, maybe $1,200 a month if I was lucky. Part-time meant even less. I couldn't pay for this house, the utilities, food, and medication on that. "I can't retire," I said quietly. "I need to work." "But if you didn't have to worry about maintaining such a large house," Thalia continued smoothly, "you might find you need less than you think. There are wonderful senior communities that take care of everything. No cooking, no cleaning, no stress." Senior communities. She was suggesting I move out of my own home. I turned to my son, waiting, hoping he'd say something, that he'd defend me, that he'd remember this was his childhood home. But he only cleared his throat and said softly, "Maybe we should think about what's best for everyone involved." everyone involved, not what was best for me. Standing in that spotless kitchen, surrounded by appliances I wasn't allowed to use and food I wasn't allowed to eat, I felt something shift deep inside. The crack that had started the night before spread wider, darker, something that would soon become impossible to ignore. "I need to get ready for work," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "Oh, you're working again today?" Thalia asked, feigning surprise. "After yesterday's marathon shift? That doesn't seem wise." "Bills don't pay themselves," I said quietly, turning toward the hallway. "Actually," Thalia's voice called after me as I headed for the hallway, "I meant to mention I'd really appreciate it if you could use the back entrance when you come home from work. Your shoes are quite loud on the hardwood, and the sound carries to our bedroom. We really need our sleep." I stopped but didn't turn around. "Use the back entrance. Like staff." "Of course," I said quietly. "I wouldn't want to disturb you." As I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, the only place in the house that still felt like mine, I could hear them whispering in the kitchen, planning more optimizations, more ways to make my home more comfortable for everyone but me. I closed my bedroom door and leaned against it, my hands trembling. 6 months ago, my son had simply asked for temporary help. Now his wife was quietly erasing me from my own life, and he was letting it happen. But as I got ready for another long hospital shift, one thought kept circling in my mind. Thalia had made a mistake. She'd forgotten one crucial detail. This house, every brick, every floorboard, was still in my name. 3 weeks later, living under Thalia's new system had worn me down to almost nothing. Every day brought some new humiliation. My toothbrush moved from the counter to a drawer. My favorite chair turned to face the wall. My mail opened and sorted without a word. But what hurt most wasn't what she moved, it was how she spoke. "Did you remember to wipe your feet before entering my clean kitchen?" Her voice would ring through the hallway, sweet but sharp. She sighed loudly whenever I used the wrong door or forgot one of her endless house rules. That Tuesday night, after another 12-hour shift, I found a note taped to the front door. "Estelle, please use the side entrance. Having guests for dinner. Thank you for understanding." Guests. In my dining room, using my china, sitting at my grandmother's table. I walked around to the side of the house, my nurse's bag heavy on my shoulder, and let myself in through the laundry room like an unwanted relative. Laughter drifted from the dining room, bright, effortless, expensive laughter. Through the staircase railing, I caught glimpses of well-dressed guests raising wine glasses, completely at ease in the home I had built and paid for. Thalia's friends, no doubt. People who would never guess that their gracious host was living rent-free in someone else's house. I climbed the stairs quietly and shut my bedroom door. Every muscle in my body ached from the day's work. 3 hip replacements, 2 knee surgeries, and a patient who had cried for her late husband until she finally fell asleep. I'd held her hand through her pain, whispering comfort I barely believed anymore. Downstairs, the laughter grew louder. Someone was telling a story about a European vacation, the easy, confident voice of someone who'd never had to count grocery receipts or skip a bill payment. I pressed a pillow over my head, but it didn't block the sound. The laughter seeped through the floorboards like poison. That night, around 11, long after the guests had gone, I crept downstairs for a glass of water. The house was dark, except for a thin stripe of light beneath Desmond and Thalia's bedroom door. As I passed, I heard voices, low, tense. "She's becoming a problem," Thalia said. I froze. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. "She'll adjust," Desmond replied softly, though even he didn't sound convinced. "She just needs time." "Time for what?" Thalia snapped. "To accept reality?" "Desmond, your mother is 66 years old and working herself into the ground. It's not sustainable." He sighed. "The job market's tough. Once I find something steady—" "That's not what I'm talking about," Thalia interrupted. There was a pause. Then her tone changed, quieter, sharper. "I'm talking about the bigger picture." "The bigger picture?" Desmond repeated uncertainly. "This house, Thalia said. It's worth what, 400,000? Maybe more with the market right now. My breath caught. 400,000. I had bought this house 15 years ago for 180. I guess, Desmond said slowly. Why? Because your mother is sitting on a gold mine while working herself to exhaustion for 60, maybe 70,000 a year. Does that make sense to you? What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting, Thalia said carefully, that we could all be living better if she were just a little more reasonable. My stomach turned. Reasonable how? Desmond asked. Think about it, Thalia continued, her voice taking on that calm, explanatory tone she always used when she wanted her way. She signs the house over to you, her only son, her natural heir anyway, and we use the equity to set everyone up properly. She could move into one of those lovely senior communities. No more property taxes, no maintenance, no stress, and we could finally start building the life we deserve. The life they deserved. With my house, my home, my life's work. I don't know, Desmond said slowly. That seems kind of what? Thalia pressed. Smart? Practical? Desmond, your mother isn't going to live forever. Eventually, you'll inherit the house anyway. This way, everyone benefits now instead of waiting for some tragic accident or illness. A chill ran down my spine. Some tragic accident or illness. I stood there in the hallway, my back pressed to the wall, trying to steady my shaking hands. For the first time since this all began, I felt something powerful replace the exhaustion and hurt. Cold, clear focus. If Thalia thought she was planning the bigger picture, she was about to find out I had one of my own. The casual way Thalia said it made my skin crawl. She'd never agree to it, Desmond murmured. She might, Thalia replied smoothly, if we approach it the right way. We'll frame it as helping her, not helping us. Emphasize how much easier her life would be without all these responsibilities. Maybe even find her a place near the hospital, shorter commute, more time to rest. And if she says no? Silence. When Thalia finally spoke again, her voice was quiet. Too quiet. I leaned closer to the door, straining to hear. Then we make her life here uncomfortable enough that moving out starts to look appealing. My blood went cold. So that was it. The constant changes, the endless rules, the small daily humiliations, none of it had been about efficiency or order. It had been a strategy, a campaign to drive me out of my own home. Thalia, I can't ask her to do that, Desmond said at last, though his voice carried no real strength. You won't have to ask, she replied, confident as ever. I've already found the perfect place. Sunset Manor, just 10 minutes from the hospital. Very nice, very clean. I even picked up a brochure today. A brochure. She'd been researching where to send me, like I was a problem to be quietly relocated. How much does something like that cost? Desmond asked weakly. About $3,000 a month for a basic apartment, she said. But here's the best part. Once we access the house equity, we can set up a trust to cover her expenses indefinitely. She'll never have to worry about money again. $3,000 a month. More than double what I currently spent, for a tiny apartment surrounded by people waiting for the days to pass, and all of it paid for with the sale of my home. I need to think about this, Desmond said finally. Of course, Thalia replied smoothly, but don't think too long. The market's hot right now, and your mother isn't getting any younger. The longer we wait, the harder this becomes. I heard the bed creak as one of them moved. Panic surged through me. I slipped quietly down the hall, back toward the kitchen. My pulse was hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. I grabbed a glass from the cabinet and filled it with water, my hands trembling so violently that it splashed across the counter. And then it hit me. This wasn't about organization. It wasn't about helping or efficiency. It was about money, my house, my life's work. They didn't see me as family anymore. I was just an obstacle standing between them and what they wanted. Every kind word Thalia had ever said, every compliment, every smile, all of it had been a performance, a calculated effort to make me trust her, to lower my guard, until I was willing to sign away everything I'd built. And Desmond, My son, the boy I had raised alone after his father left, the man I had supported through college and failure and heartbreak, was letting it happen. I set the glass down on the counter and gripped the edge of the sink, staring out the kitchen window. The moonlight touched the garden I had planted 15 years ago, the rose bushes, the little vegetable patch, the herbs along the fence. Everything I had built, tended, and loved. They wanted to take it all and store me somewhere convenient while they enjoyed the profits. But there was something they didn't know, something Thalia had missed in all her research and planning. I wasn't some frail old woman who could be frightened into compliance. I had spent 40 years taking care of difficult people, demanding patients, entitled relatives, arrogant doctors who thought they could push me around because I was just a nurse. I'd learned patience, I'd learned strategy, and I'd learned how to fight back when fighting was the only option. Standing there in my kitchen, no matter what labels Thalia put on the refrigerator, something hardened inside me. The hurt and confusion of the past weeks solidified into purpose. They thought they were dealing with someone weak. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. The water in my glass had gone warm, but I drank it anyway, swallowing it like medicine. Tomorrow, I told myself, everything would start to change. Not their way. Mine. For the first time in 3 years, I called in sick. It was 6 a.m. when I dialed the charge nurse. "Food poisoning," I said softly, making my voice sound fragile. "I'm so sorry for the short notice." "Don't worry about it, Estelle," Nancy replied kindly. "You never call out. Take care of yourself." I hung up and exhaled slowly. A lie, but a necessary one. While Thalia and Desmond slept peacefully in what they now called their master bedroom, I was already dressed and ready. I'd overheard Thalia tell her friend on the phone they'd both be out until evening. A job interview for Desmond, lunch with her sister after. Perfect. By the time their alarm went off, I was already in my car, driving downtown, toward the law office of Margaret Chen. Maggie and I had been friends since nursing school, 45 years ago now, back when we still believed we could save the world one patient at a time. 5 years later, she'd traded her scrubs for a law degree, but our friendship had never changed. She was the one person I trusted completely, and the only one who truly knew my financial situation. "Estelle," she said, looking up from her desk as her secretary showed me in. "This is a surprise." At 67, Maggie was a year older than me, but looked at least 10 years younger. Money and power were good preservatives, I supposed. "Are you okay?" she asked. "You look exhausted." "I know," I admitted, settling into the leather chair across from her. "That's actually why I'm here." I told her everything. The refrigerator, the new rules, the quiet erasure of my place in my own home. And then I told her about the conversation I'd overheard the night before, the plan to make my life uncomfortable, the nursing home brochure, the talk of selling my house. Maggie listened without interrupting, her expression darkening with each word. When I finished, she leaned back and shook her head slowly. "Estelle, this is elder abuse. It's psychological manipulation with clear financial intent. Textbook." "Can they actually do it?" I asked. "Force me to sign over the house?" "Not legally," she said firmly. "But they can make your life miserable until you give in, which, from what you've told me, is exactly what's happening." She reached for a yellow legal pad and began to write. "Tell me about the house. When did you buy it? Any loans? Mortgages?" 2008, I said. "Paid $180,000. Paid it off completely 3 years ago with money from my retirement account." Even saying it now filled me with quiet pride. After decades of bills, rent, and sacrifice, I had finally owned something, entirely mine. "And it's in your name only?" Maggie asked. "Yes, Robert and I were divorced long before that." She nodded, typing rapidly on her computer. "And you think it's worth around $400,000? "That's what Thalia said last night." Maggie's fingers moved across the keyboard. "Actually, $425, she said finally, "based on comparable sales near you. $425,000. $250,000 in equity." No wonder Thalia's eyes had sparkled when she talked about the hot market. "What are my options?" I asked quietly. Several, Maggie replied. First, I can draft a formal letter to both of them, documenting everything you've told me, making it clear that any attempt to pressure you into transferring property could result in criminal charges. I hesitated. That feels like escalation. I'm not ready for a war. Not yet. Maggie's eyes narrowed slightly. Then what are you ready for? I thought about Thalia's voice, calm, confident, cruel, planning my removal from my own home. Information, I said finally. I want to know exactly what I'm dealing with. Maggie smiled faintly. I can work with that. She made another note. I'll run a full background check on Thalia. Credit history, employment, any legal issues. Give me a few days. What about protecting the house in the meantime? I asked. There are several ways, she said. We could create a trust or add legal safeguards against fraudulent transfer, but honestly, the simplest solution is the most effective one. She looked at me over her glasses. You could sell it. My heart stopped. Sell my house? Hear me out, she said quickly. You sell, take the equity, and use it to buy something smaller. Maybe a condo closer to the hospital. Cash purchase in your name only. Then there's nothing left for them to manipulate. The thought hit like a shockwave. Terrifying, but also liberating. And what happens to Desmond and Thalia? I asked. Maggie's expression didn't soften. That, Estelle, would be their problem to solve. I let the idea sink in. My son and his wife, forced to find their own way, to pay rent like adults, to live without leaning on me. No more free housing. No more condescending arrangements. I need time to think, I said finally. Of course, Maggie replied, her voice gentle but firm, but decide soon. People like this don't stop. They keep pushing until someone pushes back harder. My next stop was the bank. I'd used the same branch of First National for 15 years, and the manager, David Rodriguez, had always been kind to me. When I asked to speak privately, he ushered me into his office without hesitation. Is everything all right, Mrs. Patterson? He asked, closing the door behind us. I just need to understand my full financial position, I said. All of it. Savings, checking, retirement, home equity, everything. He nodded and began pulling up my records. For the next hour, we went through every line. The numbers surprised me. My retirement account had recovered more than I realized. My savings, while modest, could cover months of expenses. My checking account showed something I'd never noticed before. Steady deposits, very few withdrawals. I'd been living so carefully for so long that I'd quietly built up a small safety net without even realizing it. You're in good shape, Mrs. Patterson, David said, finally smiling. Better than most people your age. You've been very responsible with your money. Responsible, frugal, careful, all the things Thalia mistook for weakness. I left the bank with a folder full of documents, but more importantly, with clarity. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel helpless. I felt focused. They wanted control of my house, but what they didn't realize was that I'd just taken control of everything else. All the things Thalia mistook for weakness, patience, restraint, silence, were the very things that made me strong. If I wanted to sell my house and buy something smaller with cash, I asked David, how quickly could that happen? He raised his eyebrows. Thinking about downsizing? I'm thinking about taking control of my life. He smiled. With the right real estate agent and a motivated buyer? 30 days. Maybe less if you're flexible on price. 30 days. 1 month to completely upend the future Thalia and Desmond had been building for me. Later that morning, my final stop was the most important one. Heritage Realty, the largest firm in town. I'd seen their signs in yards all over my neighborhood. The receptionist led me to Sarah Williams, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who looked like she could sell sand to the desert. Mrs. Patterson, she said, shaking my hand, what can I do for you today? I want to sell my house, I said simply, quickly and quietly. Sarah's expression sharpened. How quickly? 30 days, I replied. She smiled. For the right property and the right price? Anything's possible. She pulled out her tablet and began asking questions: address, square footage, recent improvements, my timeline for moving out. "I'll need to see the property, of course," she said, "but based on what you've described in the current market, we could list at around $410,000. You'd likely have offers within a week." $410,000. Even after fees and taxes, that would leave me with nearly $375,000, more money than I'd ever had in my life. "There's one condition," I said. "I need complete discretion until there's a firm offer. No yard signs, no online listings with my address, no showings unless I personally approve them." Sarah nodded. "We can do what's called a pocket listing. We'll share it only within our network of qualified buyers, private, quiet, and efficient. It'll limit exposure a bit, but in this market it shouldn't be an issue." "And if I'm paying cash for my next place?" I asked. 2 weeks, she said confidently, "maybe less." I left Heritage Realty with Sarah's business card in my pocket and a spark of excitement I hadn't felt in years. My hands were trembling, not from fear this time, but from possibility. For the first time in months, I was the one making the plans. That afternoon, I drove around neighborhoods closer to the hospital, quiet streets lined with tidy condos and smaller houses. Most were within my price range. Many were in better condition than my current home, and every single one came with a crucial advantage: no unwanted residents who thought they owned the place. By the time I returned home at 5 o'clock, my plan was solid, not just for the sale, but for everything that would come after. Where I'd live, how I'd handle the move, what I'd say when the truth finally came out. They were in the kitchen when I entered through the back door, my assigned entrance. Thalia was at the stove, stirring something that smelled expensive. Desmond sat at the counter scrolling through his phone. "Oh, good, you're home," Thalia said lightly, not even glancing up. "I was worried when you didn't come back last night. I hope you're feeling better." "Much better," I said, and I meant it. "How was your day?" "Productive," she replied, finally turning to look at me. "Desmond had a very promising interview, didn't you, honey?" Desmond looked up, blinking. "Yeah, went well. Should hear back soon." "That's wonderful," I said, setting my purse on the counter. "It'll be nice for you to get back to work." Something in my tone made Thalia pause. She studied me for the first time in weeks. "You seem different tonight," she said carefully. "Do I?" I smiled, mirroring the same bright expression she'd been giving me for months. "I suppose I feel different, refreshed, like I've remembered a few important things." "What kind of things?" "Oh, just life lessons," I said lightly. "The importance of taking control of your own situation, not letting others make your decisions for you." I opened my small refrigerator and pulled out a bottle of water. The shelves were nearly empty, a pitiful contrast to Thalia's gleaming monument to indulgence beside it. "You know how it is." Her eyes narrowed slightly, but her smile didn't waver. "Of course." I started toward the stairs, then turned back. "Oh, Thalia," I said casually. "I really do appreciate all the organizational changes you've made around here. Very educational." Her head tilted slightly. "Educational?" "Yes, it's been enlightening," I said with a smile. "Seeing how easily someone can take over when the people around them stop paying attention." I smiled again, slow and deliberate. Good thing I'm a quick learner. Then I turned and climbed the stairs, leaving them alone in the kitchen. I didn't need to see their faces to know I'd made my point. Change was coming to this house, but not the kind they were expecting. 3 weeks later, everything was in motion. Sarah had been right. The market was red hot. Within 10 days, we'd received 4 offers, all above asking price. I accepted one for $425,000, a clean cash offer from a young couple who could close in 3 weeks. My new condo, a bright 2-bedroom unit just 8 minutes from the hospital, was already purchased, the keys waiting in my purse. But there was something even more satisfying than the sale. Maggie's background check on Thalia had just come in, and the results were fascinating. Maggie's background check on Thalia revealed exactly what I'd suspected, and worse, 3 previous relationships with older men, each one ending with her walking away in a far better financial position than when she'd started. A clear pattern: move in fast, gain control, manipulate the circumstances, and cash out before anyone realized what had happened. She wasn't just opportunistic, she was experienced. But none of that would matter if I couldn't get them to show their true intentions. And that's where 40 years of dealing with difficult people finally paid off. The trap I set was simple, beautifully simple. It started with a phone call. It was a Thursday morning. Both Thalia and Desmond were out job hunting, as they called it. I picked up the phone and made my voice small and shaky, older than my years. "Desmond, honey," I said when he answered. "I need to talk to you about something important. Could you and Thalia come home? I'm scared." "Scared of what, Mom? Are you okay?" "It's my heart," I said, adding a soft tremor to my voice. "I've been having episodes at work. The doctor wants to run more tests, but—" I let the silence stretch, just long enough. "But what?" he asked. "I'm worried about what happens if something serious is wrong," I whispered. "I've been thinking about my responsibilities, about the house, about making sure you're taken care of." I could practically hear the gears turning in his head. "We'll be right there," he said. They arrived less than an hour later, both wearing the same expressions, part concern, part anticipation. I'd spent that time preparing for the performance of my life, hair slightly disheveled, makeup smudged just enough to look frail, a blanket draped around my shoulders for effect. "Mom? What's going on?" Desmond asked, helping me to the couch, my couch in the living room that used to feel like home. "I've been having chest pains," I said, pressing a hand to my heart, sharp ones that come out of nowhere. "The cardiologist wants to schedule a stress test next week, maybe more." Thalia leaned forward, her eyes wide with carefully crafted concern. "Oh, Estelle, that sounds serious." "It could be," I said softly, "and it's made me realize something. I need to get my affairs in order." I reached into my purse and pulled out a folder I'd prepared the night before. "I've been thinking about what you said, Thalia, about senior communities, about how difficult it is for me to manage this big house on my own." Her breath caught, just barely, but enough for me to notice. "Have you?" she asked, her voice light, but her pupils dilated with excitement. "I think you were right," I said. "I'm getting older, and these long shifts are taking a toll. Maybe it is time for a change." Desmond shifted uneasily. "Mom, you don't need to make any big decisions right now. Let's just see what the doctor says." But Thalia wasn't about to let the moment slip away. "Actually, Desmond," she said smoothly, "your mother's being very smart, planning ahead. That's exactly what responsible people do." I nodded, feigning gratitude. "That's what I thought too. I've even been looking into some of those communities you mentioned. Sunset Manor seems very nice." Thalia's voice brightened immediately. "It's lovely. I actually have more information about it if you'd like to see." Of course she did. Probably a spreadsheet detailing exactly how they'd spend the proceeds from my house. "I'd appreciate that," I said sweetly, "but there's something else I wanted to discuss first." I opened the folder and pulled out a crisp, official-looking document Maggie had helped me prepare. "What's that?" Desmond asked, frowning. "It's a preliminary estate planning form," I said, setting it gently on the coffee table. "If I'm moving into senior living, I should make sure the house is transferred properly, for tax and inheritance purposes, you understand?" Thalia's eyes locked on the paper like a hawk spotting prey. "My lawyer explained that transferring ownership while I'm alive could simplify things later," I continued, letting the implication hang in the air. Desmond looked uneasy. "Mom, you don't have to think about that yet." "Actually," Thalia interrupted, "that's very smart planning. So many people put it off and cause unnecessary confusion later. This way, everything's clean and legal." She was practically glowing. I forced myself to nod, playing the part of the uncertain but grateful mother. "The thing is," I said softly, "I'd need someone I trust to take over the property. Someone who could handle the taxes, the insurance, the maintenance, maybe even help with some of the transition costs." "Of course," Thalia said immediately. "We'd be honored to help however we can." "You would?" I asked, making my voice tremble with emotion. "Even though that would mean taking on all the expenses?" "That's fine," Thalia said quickly, shooting Desmond a look that silenced him before he could think too much. "And you wouldn't mind if I stayed in the house a little longer, just until I find the right community and get settled?" "Of course not," she said warmly. "You'd be welcome to stay as long as you need." Welcome to stay in my own house. The audacity almost made me laugh. "There's just one more thing," I said, pretending to review the papers. The lawyer mentioned a preliminary transfer process, something to make sure everything's legal before we finalize it. They both leaned forward. "What kind of process?" Thalia asked, her voice tight with interest. "I'd need to sign a letter of intent," I explained, "and you'd both need to sign acknowledgement forms confirming your willingness to take on all responsibilities." I slid 2 papers across the table, the ones Maggie had prepared. Unlike the first document, these were very real and very binding. "What exactly would we be acknowledging?" Desmond asked, a flicker of caution finally appearing. "Oh, just that you understand what you're agreeing to," I said smoothly. "The property taxes, about $4,000 a year, insurance, another $1,800 annually, maintenance costs, utilities, and general upkeep." Thalia's smile faltered, just slightly, as I continued. "It's a lot to take on," I said gently, "but I'm sure you're both up to it." I could almost hear Maggie's voice in my head, calm and professional. "Make them commit to the responsibility. Once they sign, they own the burden, not the benefit." And in that moment, watching Thalia's eager expression waver between greed and hesitation, I knew I'd finally taken back control. "Maintenance and repairs average about $3,000 a year for a house this age," I said calmly, reading from the paper. "Utilities when I'm not here to cover them, another $1,200 or so." I watched Thalia's expression as the numbers sank in, nearly $9,000 a year in carrying costs, not including the mortgage payments they didn't know didn't exist. "Of course," she said smoothly, recovering fast. "Once the transfer is complete, we'd have access to the equity to cover those expenses." "Oh no," I said softly, shaking my head as though regretful. "That's not how it works. The equity stays locked until I actually move out and the house is sold. This preliminary transfer just establishes legal responsibility, very common according to my lawyer." The light in Thalia's eyes flickered. "How long would that arrangement last?" "Well, that depends," I said, tapping the papers lightly, "on how long it takes me to find the right community. Could be 6 months, could be a year, maybe longer if my health becomes complicated. A year, maybe more, of paying expenses with no access to equity." I could practically see the calculations running behind her eyes. "I understand it's a lot to ask," I added with a sigh. "Maybe I should look into other options. I'm sure one of my colleagues at the hospital might be interested in a rent-to-own arrangement." "No," Thalia said quickly, cutting me off. "We want to help, don't we, Desmond?" My son looked miserable. "Of course, Mom, if that's what you want." "You're both so kind," I said, reaching for the pen. "Shall we make it official, then?" I signed my name with a deliberate flourish and handed the pen to Thalia. She didn't even skim the fine print before signing her acknowledgement form, a mistake that would cost her dearly. Desmond hesitated, but under Thalia's sharp look, he added his signature too. "There," I said, sliding the papers back into my folder. "Now I can finally relax, knowing everything's arranged properly." Thalia leaned forward, her voice bright and falsely warm. "When do you think you'll start looking at places?" "Oh, I already have," I said with a smile. "In fact, I have a few appointments this weekend. Very exclusive places, the kind with waiting lists." Her smile turned triumphant. "That's wonderful, Estelle. I'm so proud of you for taking this step." I thanked her sweetly. When they left the room, no doubt to celebrate their victory in private, I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile, because the documents they'd just signed weren't meaningless. They were legally binding acknowledgments of financial responsibility for my property, committing them to cover all carrying costs whether they owned the house or not. And every word of their earlier conversation, every manipulative suggestion, every greedy promise was saved on my phone, recorded in perfect clarity. Maggie had confirmed it would be admissible if things ever went to court, but I didn't think it would come to that, because by tomorrow morning they'd realize the truth. The house they thought they were about to inherit had already been sold. The woman they believed they were outsmarting had outmaneuvered them completely. The closing was scheduled for 10 a.m. By noon, Desmond and Thalia would discover that their perfect plan had one fatal flaw. They'd underestimated the woman they'd tried to deceive. I slept better that night than I had in months. Tomorrow would be the reckoning they never saw coming. The closing went perfectly. By 10:30 Friday morning, I was sitting across from the buyers, a young couple thrilled to purchase their first home. By 11, the papers were signed. At 11:30, I walked out of the title office with a cashier's check for $378,000 tucked safely inside my purse. The couple got their keys. I got my freedom. There were no liens, no disputes, no family complications, just a clean sale and a brand new beginning. I drove slowly through the neighborhood, taking in the familiar streets for what I knew would be the last time as a resident. The house looked peaceful from the outside, modest, but well kept. My garden still bloomed, defiant and alive, even after everything that had happened inside those walls. Desmond's car was in the driveway. Thalia's wasn't. Perfect. I'd rather start with him. He was in the kitchen when I walked in, sitting at the counter with his laptop open. He looked up, and for a moment I almost didn't recognize him. My son, 42, but suddenly so much older. The years of stress and poor choices etched clearly across his face. "Hey, Mom," he said softly. "How'd the doctor appointment go?" I'd almost forgotten about my fictional heart condition. "Fine," I said. "Just routine tests." "Good." He turned back to his computer. "Thalia's out looking at furniture. For when the house situation gets settled." Furniture. For my house. The one I'd sold out from under them. I sat down across from him, resting my purse gently on the counter. "Desmond," I said evenly, "we need to talk." Something in my tone made him look up. "What about?" "About the house," I said, "and about what you and Thalia have been planning." His face went still, carefully blank. "I don't know what you mean." "I think you do," I said quietly. I reached into my purse, pulled out my phone, and set it on the counter between us. "I heard you that night," I said. 3 weeks ago, talking about making my life uncomfortable enough that I'd want to move out. About cashing in on the equity, I continued quietly, about moving me into some facility while you two enjoyed the profits. The color drained from Desmond's face. "Mom, I recorded our conversation yesterday," I said evenly. "The one where you both signed legal documents accepting financial responsibility for this property." "You recorded us?" His voice cracked. "I've been recording everything for the past month," I said. "Every cruel comment from Thalia, every time she treated me like a guest in my own home, every moment you stood by and let her do it." Desmond stared at the phone like it might explode. "Why would you do that?" "Because I needed to understand what I was dealing with," I said. "And what I discovered is that my own son was willing to manipulate and deceive his mother for money." "It wasn't like that," he said quickly. "We weren't trying to hurt you. We just thought—" "You thought what?" I interrupted sharply. "That I was too old to notice? Too tired to fight back? That I'd just sign away my life's work and quietly disappear?" He winced. "We thought we were helping." "Helping yourselves," I said flatly. The front door opened. "I'm back." Thalia's voice rang through the hallway, bright and cheerful. "Wait until you see the beautiful dining set I found. It'll be perfect once we—" She stopped cold in the doorway, taking in the scene. "What's going on?" she asked, her tone shifting immediately. "I was just explaining to Desmond," I said calmly, "that I know about your plan." Thalia's expression flickered. Confusion, then calculation. What plan? The one where you manipulate me into signing over my house, I said. So you can sell it, pocket the profit, and leave me somewhere out of sight. That's ridiculous, she said quickly, but her voice trembled. Is it? I asked. Because I have recordings that say otherwise. The air in the room seemed to freeze. Thalia moved behind Desmond, gripping the back of his chair. Her voice dropped, measured but tense. Even if that were true, she said slowly, you already agreed to transfer the house. You signed the papers yesterday. I smiled then, the same bright, polite smile she'd used on me for months. Actually, I said, I didn't. Her brow furrowed. What do you mean? I mean the papers you signed were real legal documents, I said. Mine was just a draft my lawyer created to see what you'd do. You both legally agreed to assume full financial responsibility for the property, taxes, insurance, utilities, maintenance, for an entire year. Desmond blinked. But you said you were transferring it to us. I lied, I said simply. Just like you've been lying to me for months. Thalia's grip tightened. You can't do this. We had an agreement. No, I said, standing. We had a conversation where you revealed your true intentions, and I pretended to go along with it. I lifted my purse from the counter. The same way you pretended to care about my health while plotting to steal from me. Where are you going? Desmond asked. To my new home, I said. The condo I bought with the money from selling this house. Silence, then confusion, then horror, spreading slowly across both their faces. You sold the house? Thalia whispered. Closed this morning, I said. $378,000 cash in hand. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. But we signed those documents, she stammered. We're responsible for the taxes and insurance and maintenance and utilities, I finished for her. Yes, you are. For the next 12 months, you're legally obligated to cover all of it for a property you'll never own. Desmond looked like he might be sick. Mom, you can't do this to us. I can't do what? I asked softly. Treat you the way you've treated me? Use you for money? Make you feel unwelcome in your own home? This was our home too, Thalia snapped, her voice rising. No, I said firmly. It was my home. You were guests. Guests who decided to take advantage of my kindness and turn it into weakness. I walked toward the hallway, then paused and turned back one last time. Desmond sat slumped in his chair, his head in his hands. Thalia stood behind him, frozen, her face a mask of disbelief and rage. The new owners take possession on Monday, I said quietly. You have the weekend to find somewhere else to live. Desmond's voice cracked. Where are we supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore, I said. You're adults. Figure it out. I walked to the front door, my hand resting on the knob for just a moment. Through the kitchen doorway, I could still see them. My son and the woman who'd nearly destroyed him, finally facing the cost of their own choices. A part of me ached for Desmond. He'd always been easily led, always looking for the easiest way forward. Thalia had seen that weakness and used it like a weapon. But sympathy was a luxury I couldn't afford anymore. They'd made their choices. Now they could live with them. When I pulled away from the house, I didn't look back. By the time I reached my new condo, sunlight was pouring through the windows, warm, clean, and full of promise. I set the cashier's check on the counter beside my new keys and let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for months. 40 years of nursing had taught me many lessons. How to stay calm under pressure, how to handle difficult people, and most importantly, how to recognize when someone's pretending to care. Thalia had played her game beautifully, but I'd played mine better. And for the first time in years, I was truly, finally, free. I opened the door and stepped out into the bright morning sun. My new condo was waiting. 2 bedrooms, a modern kitchen, and a balcony overlooking the city where I'd lived, worked, and built my life. No unwanted residents, no one to answer to, no one who could take away what I'd earned. As I drove away from the house for the last time, I caught a glimpse of them in my rear-view mirror, standing in the doorway watching me go. They looked smaller, somehow. Diminished. My phone buzzed with a text from Maggie. How did it go? I pulled over and typed back, "Perfect. They never saw it coming." "And how do you feel?" she asked. I sat there for a long moment, thinking. How did I feel? Not guilty. They'd brought this on themselves. Not sad. I'd already grieved the loss of my son when I realized what kind of man he'd become. Not angry. Anger was heavy, and I was finally free of it. So I typed 2 words back. Peaceful. Free. The condo was everything the pictures had promised and more. Bright, quiet, beautifully simple. Granite countertops. Stainless steel appliances that belonged to me and only me. A walk-in closet, an ensuite bathroom, a spare bedroom I'd turn into a home office. But the best part was the silence. No footsteps overhead, no whispered arguments, no feeling of being unwelcome in my own home. Just quiet, blessed, healing quiet. I made myself a cup of real coffee from my old coffee maker that I'd rescued from the basement and sat on the balcony, watching the city below. Somewhere out there, Desmond and Thalia were probably in the middle of the fight of their lives, scrambling to fix the pieces of their broken plan. But that wasn't my concern anymore. Around noon, my phone rang. Desmond's name lit up the screen. I let it go to voicemail. "Mom," his voice said when I listened later, "please, call me back. We need to talk. There has to be some way to work this out." I deleted the message without hesitation. An hour later, another call came. Thalia this time. Her voice was sharp, brittle with rage. "You think you're so clever, don't you? But this isn't over, Estelle. You can't just walk away and think there won't be consequences." I blocked her number. That evening, as I unpacked the last of my boxes, I found a photo album I hadn't seen in months. Desmond's childhood. Birthdays, Christmas mornings, school plays, scraped knees, and messy smiles. I looked through the pages one last time, then closed the album and tucked it deep into the back of the closet. Some chapters aren't meant to be reopened. 6 months later, I was thriving. My commute was short, my work lighter, my savings growing faster than ever. I'd even started taking classes again, just for me. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard that Desmond and Thalia had moved in with her parents, then into a small apartment across town. Their relationship hadn't survived the strain of their failed scheme. Turns out, couples built on greed don't weather disappointment well. Desmond eventually found work. Modest, steady, not glamorous. And Thalia, well, the job market doesn't exactly welcome someone whose main skill is manipulation. When I heard, I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity, no regret. They were strangers to me now, names that no longer carried meaning. And that was exactly how I wanted it. On my 67th birthday, I did something I'd never done before. I booked a weekend trip to the coast, just because I could. I sat on the beach at sunset, listening to the waves, feeling the salt air on my face. For the first time in years, I wasn't taking care of anyone else. I wasn't responsible for anyone's comfort, anyone's needs, anyone's expectations. I was just me, a woman watching the end of another day, knowing that tomorrow would come, and whatever it brought, I'd face it on my own terms. It was the most beautiful sunset I'd ever seen. Now, I'm curious about you, the one listening to my story. What would you have done if you were in my place? Have you ever faced something like this, when someone tried to take advantage of your kindness? Tell me in the comments below. I read every story you share, and they always remind me how far this community reaches. And before you go, I'm leaving 2 more stories on the screen, true channel favorites, each with its own twist that'll leave you speechless. Thank you for watching until the end. And remember, sometimes peace isn't found by forgiving. It's found by finally walking away.